a victorious Scottish warrior returns from battle with honour, power, and the admiration of his king. Then, on a lonely heath, 3 mysterious witches greet him with an astonishing prophecy. They tell Macbeth that he will rise to greater power and one day become King of Scotland. At first, the prediction seems impossible, but when part of the prophecy quickly comes true, a dangerous ambition begins to take hold. Encouraged by his ruthless and determined wife, Macbeth decides not to wait for fate to crown him. He will seize the throne for himself, whatever the cost. But once the first terrible crime has been committed, there can be no easy escape. One murder leads to another, suspicion turns into fear, and Macbeth becomes increasingly willing to destroy anyone who threatens his power. Yet the higher he rises, the more he is haunted by guilt, paranoia, and the terrifying possibility that the witches have led him towards his own destruction. Can Macbeth hold on to the crown he has won through blood, or will his ambition ultimately destroy everything he fought to gain? This is Macbeth by William Shakespeare. I'm Roger Braveheart, and a very warm welcome to the Classic Tales by Firelight Channel. Here, some of the world's greatest classic stories are retold in a clear, entertaining, and atmospheric style that is easy to follow and enjoyable to listen to. You can settle back and give the story your full attention, or simply leave it playing in the background while you work, travel, relax, or get on with something else. In this dark and powerful tragedy, Macbeth is transformed from a brave and respected warrior into a fearful and increasingly ruthless king. Along the way, you'll discover why this remains one of the greatest stories of ambition, prophecy, murder, guilt, madness, betrayal, and the corrupting influence of power ever written. By the end, you'll understand the main events, characters, and ideas well enough to remember the story and speak confidently about it with others. My challenge is to transform Shakespeare's remarkable play into an exciting and atmospheric retelling, while preserving its important events, relationships, mysteries, supernatural warnings, and emotional impact. Most of the summarized stories on this channel are around 75 minutes long, although shorter works such as Macbeth may not require the full running time. I previously experimented with 30-minute summaries, but I found that too much of the plot, character development, and atmosphere sometimes had to be removed, and the stories suffered as a result. The longer format gives each story more room to breathe while still offering a shorter and more accessible way to experience a great classic. This retelling is based on William Shakespeare's original play, rather than on any of the many modern films, television productions, or theatrical adaptations, which may have altered characters, events, settings, or details through the use of artistic license. Okay, so without further delay, let's get cracking. 3 witches meet on open ground amid thunder and lightning, and agree that when the battle is over they will gather again on a heath to encounter a soldier named Macbeth. Their parting words set the mood for everything that follows. Fair is foul, and foul is fair. Nearby, King Duncan of Scotland waits for news from the fighting. A wounded captain reports that the rebel MacDonald nearly carried the day, until brave Macbeth cut his way through the enemy ranks and killed the rebel outright, fixing his head upon the battlements. When the King of Norway then launched a fresh assault, Macbeth and his fellow General Banquo fought with doubled fury and won again. A Scottish nobleman arrives with further news. The Norwegian king has been beaten and must pay a ransom before he can even bury his dead, and the Thane of Cawdor has been exposed as a traitor who aided the enemy. Duncan orders the traitor executed and commands that his title be given to Macbeth as a reward. Meanwhile, Macbeth and Banquo cross the heath fresh from victory and come upon the 3 witches. The strange women greet Macbeth with 3 titles: Thane of Glamis, which he already holds, Thane of Cawdor, which he does not know he has just been given, and King hereafter. Macbeth stands transfixed while Banquo, half joking, asks what they can tell him. They answer that Banquo will be lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy yet much happier, and that though he will never be king himself, his descendants will sit on the throne. When Macbeth presses them to explain, they vanish into the air, leaving the two soldiers wondering whether they imagined the whole thing. Moments later, a Scottish nobleman rides up and, in the king's name, greets Macbeth as Thane of Cawdor. One prophecy has already come true within minutes of being spoken. Banquo is quietly alarmed and warns his friend that the instruments of darkness often tell small truths in order to betray men in matters of deepest consequence. But Macbeth is already lost in thought. If the first greeting proved true, he reasons, why not the last? The idea of the crown stirs something terrible in him, and he admits in private that his mind is already entertaining a murder whose very image makes his hair stand on end, though the deed exists only in fantasy. Then he pulls himself together and decides to let chance crown him, if chance will, without any effort of his own. At the royal palace, Duncan receives reports that the executed traitor died with frank confession and deep repentance, and remarks ruefully that there is no way to read a man's mind from his face, for this was a man on whom he had built absolute trust. It is a pointed observation, because at that moment Macbeth enters, and the king lavishes praise and affection on him, lamenting that he can never repay his services. Then Duncan does something that changes everything. He publicly names his eldest son Malcolm as heir to the throne, Prince of Cumberland, and announces that the whole court will travel to Macbeth Castle at Inverness to celebrate. Macbeth's reaction is private and chilling. Malcolm's promotion is a step in his way, he tells himself, one he must either fall before or leap over, and he calls on the stars to hide their fires so that no light will see his black and deep desires. The loyal hero of the morning's battle has, within a single day, been given a prophecy, a new title, and an obstacle, and already his eye is fixed on the crown with a longing he is afraid to acknowledge. The king, suspecting nothing, rides happily toward the home of the man he calls his peerless kinsman. At Macbeth's castle, Lady Macbeth reads a letter from her husband. He tells her about the witches on the heath, how they greeted him as Thane of Cawdor, a title that has already come true, and how they promised he would be king hereafter. Her reaction is instant. She knows he is ambitious, but she fears his nature is too full of the milk of human kindness to take the shortest path to what he wants. He would be great, but he would be great honourably. She resolves to pour her fierce spirit into his ear and chastise away everything that stands between him and the golden crown. A messenger arrives breathless with startling news. King Duncan is coming to the castle tonight. Alone, Lady Macbeth calls on dark spirits to unsex her, to fill her from the crown to the toe with the direst cruelty, to thicken her blood against remorse, and to turn her milk to gall. She prays for a night so thick that heaven itself cannot peep through the dark and cry hold. When Macbeth arrives, she greets him by his new titles. He tells her Duncan comes tonight and plans to leave tomorrow. Never shall that tomorrow dawn, she answers. She warns him that his face is an open book where men may read strange matters, and instructs him to look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. The king must be provided for, and she will manage everything. Macbeth says only that they will speak further, which is not agreement, but it is not refusal either. The king arrives in warm spirits, admiring the pleasant air of the castle and the birds that nest lovingly on its walls, never dreaming what waits inside. Lady Macbeth welcomes him with flawless courtesy and leads him in. While Duncan dines, Macbeth wrestles alone with the plan. If the deed could be done and be finished at once, it would be best done quickly. But bloody acts teach others to do the same, and the poisoned cup returns to its maker's lips. Duncan is here in double trust. Macbeth is his kinsman and subject, and also his host who should shut the door against a murderer, not carry the knife himself. Worse, Duncan has ruled so gently and honestly that his virtues will plead like angels against his death, and pity will spread the horror everywhere. Macbeth admits he has no spur but vaulting ambition which overleaps itself and falls. He tells his wife they will go no further in this business. The king has honoured him lately, and he is wearing golden opinions from all sides. He will not throw them away so soon. Her counter-attack is merciless. Was he drunk when he first hoped for this? Is he afraid to be in action what he is in desire? Would he rather dream of the crown and live a coward in his own esteem? When he dared to imagine the deed, she says, that is when he was a man. Then she delivers a shocking oath. She has nursed a child and knows its tenderness, yet she would have plucked it from her breast and dashed its brains out, had she sworn to it as he swore to this. Macbeth wavers. If we should fail, he asks. We fail, she scoffs. Only screw your courage to the sticking place. Her plan is simple. She will drug the king's 2 chamberlains with wine until they lie as in a death, leaving Duncan unguarded, and the sleeping servants will bear the guilt. Macbeth asks whether it will be believed when the grooms are found marked with blood, their own daggers beside them. She answers that no one will dare question it. Once the 2 of them raise their clamour of grief over the body, Macbeth is settled. He bends every part of himself to the terrible feat, and they go off together to hide a false heart behind a false face. Late that night, Banquo walks through the castle court with his young son. The moon is down and the stars are out, yet a strange heaviness lies on him. He does not want to sleep, because sleep gives way to cursed thoughts, and he prays to be restrained from them. Macbeth appears with a servant. Banquo says the king has gone to bed in unusual good humour, and has sent a diamond to Lady Macbeth in thanks for her hospitality. He adds that he dreamed of the 3 witches, whose words have already shown Macbeth some truth. Macbeth answers coolly that he does not think of them, though he would gladly talk the matter over some time. Then he hints that if Banquo stands by him when the time comes, there will be honours in it. Banquo replies carefully, he will listen so long as he can keep his conscience free and his allegiance clear. With that, they part. Left alone, Macbeth sees something impossible, a dagger floating before him, its handle toward his hand. He clutches at nothing, yet still he sees it, and now there are drops of blood on the blade that were not there before. It is, he decides, a dagger of the mind, shaped by the bloody business ahead. Around him, he says, witchcraft celebrates its offerings and withered murder moves toward its design like a ghost. The night seems dead, the world asleep, and he begs the earth not to hear his steps. A bell rings, the signal from his wife. He goes, telling himself the bell summons Duncan to heaven or to hell. Lady Macbeth waits in the dark, made bold by the same wine that has drugged the king's attendants into a death-like stupor. She has laid their daggers ready, and only one thing held her back from doing the deed herself. The sleeping king resembled her father. Macbeth enters, his hands red. It is done, he says, but he is shattered. She says she heard only the owl's scream and the cricket's cry. He asks who lies in the second chamber, and she answers, the king's younger son. As Macbeth came down, he heard voices. One sleeper laughed, another cried murder, and when they murmured their prayers and one said, God bless us, he found he could not say Amen, though he needed blessing most of all. Worse, he thought he heard a voice cry that Macbeth had murdered sleep itself, the innocent sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care, and that Macbeth would sleep no more. His wife has no patience for this. Such thoughts, she warns, will drive them mad. She tells him to wash the blood away, then sees he has brought the daggers with him, instead of leaving them on the drugged grooms. He must carry them back and smear the sleepers with blood. Macbeth refuses. He cannot bear to look on what he has done. Calling him infirm of purpose, she takes the daggers herself and goes. Knocking sounds at the gate. Macbeth stares at his hands in horror. Whence is that knocking, he wonders, when every noise appalls him? Will all the ocean's water wash this blood clean? No, his hand would sooner turn the green seas red. His wife returns, her own hands red now too, but her heart, she says scornfully, is not white with fear. A little water, she insists, clears them of this deed. How easy it is. She hurries him to their chamber to put on a nightgown, so they will seem innocent sleepers if anyone calls. Macbeth trails after her, half hearing. To know my deed, he says, it were best not to know myself. And as the knocking grows, he cries out for it to wake the sleeping king, wishing desperately that it could. The knocking continues, and the castle's gatekeeper stumbles out, half drunk, to answer it. He jokes that portering this gate is like portering the gate of hell, and imagines the souls he might be letting in. A farmer who hanged himself over a failed harvest, an equivocator who could argue both sides of any question, yet could not talk his way into heaven, and a cheating tailor. At last he opens the gate to Macduff, a nobleman come early at the king's command with a fellow lord, and rambles on about the three things drink provokes before leading them in. Macbeth appears, apparently just woken, and brings Macduff to the king's door. While they wait, the other lord describes the wild night, chimneys blown down, strange screams in the air, the night bird shrieking till dawn, and some say the earth itself shook. Then Macduff reappears, and his face says everything. Horror, horror, horror. The king has been murdered. Sacrilege, he cries, has broken open the Lord's anointed temple and stolen the life from it, and he raises the alarm. The castle erupts. Lady Macbeth arrives, demanding to know what the hideous trumpet means. Banquo comes, and Macbeth delivers a smooth lament that had he died an hour earlier, he would have lived a blessed time, for now the wine of life is drawn, and only the dregs remain. Malcolm and his younger brother are told their father is dead. By whom, they ask. The king's own attendants, it seems. Their hands and faces were smeared with blood, and their daggers lay unwiped on their pillows. At that, Macbeth announces that he killed the attendants himself in a sudden fury. Macduff asks quietly why he did that, and Macbeth offers a florid excuse about loyal rage overcoming reason at the sight of the king's body. Lady Macbeth chooses this moment to call for help, and is carried out, whether truly fainting or artfully drawing every eye. Banquo calls for them all to meet and question this bloody work, declaring that he stands in the great hand of God against whatever treason is still hidden, and the others agree to gather in the hall. The two brothers exchange low words. This is no place for them. To show unfelt sorrow is easy for a false man, and there are daggers in men's smiles, the nearer in blood, the nearer bloody. Their tears are not yet brewed, one says, and better to avoid the aim of a shaft still in flight. They will separate for safety, one to England and one to Ireland, slipping away without ceremony. For when no mercy is left, stealing away is justified. Outside the castle, in a darkness that should be morning, an old man and a nobleman marvel at the unnatural signs. The old man says that in 70 years he has seen dreadful hours, but this sore night has made them all seem trifles. Daylight has been strangled. Days earlier, a falcon soaring at its height was killed by a mousing owl. Most terrible of all, Duncan's own horses, the finest of their kind, turned wild, broke their stalls, and, as eyewitnesses swear, ate each other. Nature itself seems in revolt against the deed. Macduff joins them with news. The blame has fallen on the chamberlains Macbeth killed, and suspicion now clings to the king's sons because they fled, which looks like guilt. Macbeth is already named king and gone to Scone to be crowned, while Duncan's body has been carried to the burial place of his ancestors. Macduff will not attend the coronation. He is going home to Fife, with a parting wish that the new robes may sit no worse than the old. Macbeth is king now, crowned at Scone, and Banquo, alone, turns the facts over in his mind. Macbeth has everything the witches promised, Glamis, Cawdor, and the crown. But Banquo fears he played most foully for it. And if their words about Macbeth came true, why should their words about Banquo not come true as well? He was told he would be the father of a line of kings. He hushes the thought, but the seed is planted. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth enter in state. They are holding a great supper that evening, and Banquo is the chief guest. Macbeth questions him pleasantly. Does he ride this afternoon? How far? Will his son go with him? He warns Banquo with sinister courtesy not to fail the feast, and wishes his horses swift and sure of foot. Banquo answers openly and rides off. The moment he is gone, Macbeth's mask drops. To be king is nothing, he says, unless he is safely king. His fear of Banquo sticks deep, for Banquo is daring, wise, and royal in nature, and the witches hailed him as father to a line of kings. They placed a fruitless crown on Macbeth's head, and a barren sceptre in his grip, to be torn away by an outsider's hand, with no son of his to follow. If so, he has defiled his soul and murdered gracious Duncan, only to make Banquo's children kings. He will challenge fate itself first. He has already arranged the remedy. 2 desperate men, hired killers, are brought in, and Macbeth works on them like a skilled tempter, convincing them that Banquo, not Macbeth, authored their past misfortunes. Are they so patient that they will pray for the man who ground them down? When they answer bitterly that they are men, he twists the word. As there are dogs and dogs, he says, each valued by its own qualities, so there are men and men, and if they are worth the name, they will prove it now. Won over, the 2 declare themselves so battered by the world that they will stake their lives on anything. Macbeth gives the orders. Banquo dies tonight, away from the palace, and, no less important, his son dies with him. The king's own hands must appear clean. Elsewhere in the palace, the crown is already turning to ashes. Lady Macbeth admits that all is spent and nothing gained. It is safer to be the person they destroyed than to live in doubtful joy. Macbeth feels it too, only darker. They have scorched the snake, he tells her, not killed it, and it will heal and strike again. He envies Duncan, who sleeps well in his grave, beyond treason's reach, while they eat in fear and lie on the torture of a restless mind. She urges him to sleek over his rugged looks and be bright among the guests, but he lets slip that a deed of dreadful note will be done before dark. When she asks what it is, he refuses to say, "Be innocent of the knowledge until you can applaud the deed." Things bad begun, he murmurs, make themselves strong by more ill. As dusk falls, 3 killers wait near the palace, a 3rd man having joined the first 2, saying Macbeth sent him, and that the instructions can be trusted. Hoofbeats approach, Banquo returning with his son, right on schedule. They set on him in the dark. Banquo, struck down, has just time to shout to the boy to fly and one day avenge him before he dies. In the confusion, the torch goes out, and the son escapes into the night. The killers stand over the father and realize they have lost the best half of their business. The boy lives, and with him lives the prophecy. The royal banquet begins in apparent splendour. Macbeth plays the humble host while Lady Macbeth holds her place of honour. Then he notices one of the hired killers at the door with blood on his face and slips aside to hear the news. Banquo's throat is cut. The body lies safe in a ditch with 20 gashes, the least of them fatal. But the son escaped. Macbeth feels the ground give way. He had been perfect, whole as marble, founded as the rock, and now he is cabined and confined by doubts and fears again. Still, he tells himself, the grown serpent lies dead. The worm that fled has no teeth yet. He returns to the table and his wife chides him for neglecting his guests. He raises the cheer and speaks warmly of the absent Banquo, wishing aloud their friend were there. Then he goes to sit and finds his place occupied. The murdered Banquo, blooded and silent, is sitting in the king's seat. No one else can see him. Macbeth recoils, crying that the figure cannot say he did it, telling it never to shake its gory locks at him. The thanes rise in confusion. Lady Macbeth moves fast, assuring everyone the king has suffered such fits since his youth, and it will pass if they ignore him. To her husband she hisses the old challenge, "Are you a man?" This is only the painting of his fear, she says, an air-drawn dagger, like the one that led him to Duncan. When the ghost vanishes, Macbeth collects himself and pours wine, toasting the whole table and their dear absent friend. But as he speaks Banquo's name, the ghost rises again, and he erupts, bidding the horrible shadow quit his sight and daring it to take any other shape, swearing his nerves would never tremble. The feast collapses. Lady Macbeth dismisses the lords hurriedly, telling them not to stand on ceremony, and they file out bewildered, murmuring wishes for the king's health. Alone, the king and queen face each other. Macbeth is certain of one thing: blood will have blood. Murders come to light by strange means. Stones have moved, and trees have spoken to expose secret killers. He has heard that Macduff refused his summons, and he keeps a paid spy in every noble house. Tomorrow he will go to the witches and demand the worst, whatever it costs. He has stepped in blood so far, he says, that turning back would be as wearisome as going on, and he has strange things in his head that must be acted before they are even examined. Lady Macbeth answers that he lacks sleep, and they go to bed, still, in his own words, young indeed. Meanwhile, on the heath the three witches are being scolded by their mistress, the queen of witchcraft. How dared they trade with Macbeth in riddles and affairs of death without her? And all their labour has been for a wayward man who loves them only for his own ends. She orders them to meet her in the morning, where Macbeth will come to learn his destiny, and she will spend the night preparing illusions to draw him on to his confusion, until he scorns death and carries his hopes above wisdom, grace, and fear. Security, she reminds them, is mortal's chiefest enemy. At court, a nobleman talks with a lord, every sentence dripping with dangerous irony. Macbeth has borne all things well, he says. He pitied gracious Duncan. After Duncan was dead, valiant Banquo walked out too late, and doubtless his own son killed him, since the son fled. And how nobly Macbeth tore the guilty servants to pieces, in righteous rage before they could deny anything. Beneath the sarcasm lies real news. Macduff, out of favour, has gone to England, where Malcolm lives at the court of the pious English king, to beg help in raising an army and freeing Scotland, so that people can eat in peace, sleep at night, and feast without bloody knives. The report has enraged Macbeth, who is preparing for war. The two men part with a prayer that a swift blessing may soon return to their suffering country, groaning under a hand accursed. In a dark cave, around a boiling cauldron, the three witches stir a hellish brew of entrails and monstrous ingredients, chanting double, double toil and trouble. By the pricking of her thumbs one knows something wicked is coming, and that wicked thing is Macbeth. He bursts in and commands them to answer him, whatever storms their magic unleashes. They summon three apparitions. An armed head warns him, "Beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife." A bloody child tells him to be bloody bold and resolute, for no man born of woman shall harm him. A crowned child carrying a tree promises he will never be vanquished until great Burnham Wood comes to Dunsinane Hill. Macbeth is jubilant. Forest cannot march. So he is safe, though he resolves to kill Macduff anyway, to make assurance double sure. One question still throbs. Will Banquo's line ever reign? Against the witch's warning he demands an answer, and a procession of 8 kings passes before him, the last holding a mirror showing many more, with the blood-stained ghost of Banquo smiling behind and pointing them out as his. The witches dance and vanish, and Macbeth curses the hour. Word comes that Macduff has fled to England. Macbeth's answer marks a terrible turn. From now on, the first thought of his heart will be the first act of his hand. He will surprise Macduff's castle and give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and every soul in his line. At the castle, Macduff's wife cannot understand why her husband fled and left his family behind. To a visiting nobleman she pours out her bitterness. His flight looks like fear, not love or wisdom. The nobleman gently defends him, calls the times cruel, when people are treated as traitors without knowing why, and leaves. Lady Macduff falls into a tender, teasing conversation with her young son, telling him his father is dead. The bright boy refuses to believe it, and they trade quips about traitors and hanging, his wit shining against the darkness closing in. A stranger hurries in, warning that danger is nearly upon her, and begging her to flee with her little ones. He is hardly gone when the hired killers arrive, demanding her husband. When her small son flies at them, shouting that they lie, he is stabbed before her eyes, dying with the words, "Run away, mother." She flees screaming, the killers at her heels. In England, before the King's Palace, Malcolm does not welcome Macduff with open arms. The sudden flight, leaving wife and children unguarded, has made him suspect, so Malcolm puts him to a strange test. Painting himself as a monster of lust and greed, empty of every kingly virtue, worse than Macbeth. Macduff tries to excuse him, then breaks. Such a man is not fit to govern, not fit to live, and he grieves for poor Scotland. At that, Malcolm drops the mask. The slanders were a trial of Macduff's honesty, and he has passed. Malcolm abjures every false word and reveals that the old English general is already marching with 10,000 men. A Scottish nobleman arrives from home, and Macduff asks anxiously after his wife and children. The messenger hesitates, then delivers the truth. The castle has been surprised, his wife and babes savagely slaughtered, everyone that could be found. Macduff is stunned. "All my pretty chickens," he keeps repeating, "and their dam at one fell swoop." Malcolm urges him to turn grief into anger. Macduff answers that he must also feel it as a man, for those precious souls were struck down for his sake. He prays only to be set face to face with the fiend of Scotland within his sword's length, and the exiles prepare to march on the ripe tyrant. In the castle at Dunsinane, a doctor and a waiting gentlewoman keep watch at night. The queen walks in her sleep, candle in hand, eyes open but their senses shut, rubbing her hands as if washing them. "Out, damned spot," she cries, and relives fragments of everything. Her scorn for a soldier's fear, the old king who had so much blood in him, the question of where Macduff's wife is now, and the bitter knowledge that all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten one little hand. Then, back in that first night, she reminds herself that Banquo is buried and cannot rise, and that what is done cannot be undone, before returning to bed. The doctor is shaken. Unnatural deeds breed unnatural troubles. She needs the divine more than the physician, and she must be watched and kept from every means of harm. Outside, the world is closing in. Scottish thanes march to join Malcolm, the English general, and Macduff near Birnam Wood. They speak of the tyrant fortifying Dunsinane. Some call him mad, others say valiant fury, but his followers obey from fear, not love, and his stolen title hangs loose about him, like a giant's robe on a dwarfish thief. Inside, Macbeth swings between despair and wild confidence. He cannot fear, he insists, until Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane, and as for Malcolm, was he not born of woman? When a pale servant reports 10,000 English soldiers, Macbeth screams at the boy's white face, then admits he is sick at heart. His way of life has fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf. The things that should accompany old age, honour, love, obedience, troops of friends, he must not look to have. Only curses and hollow lip service. He calls for his armour and asks the doctor about his wife. "Can you not minister to a mind diseased?" he asks. "Pluck a rooted sorrow from the memory." There, the doctor says, the patient must minister to himself, and Macbeth flings the medicine aside. Near Burnham, Malcolm orders every soldier to cut a bough and carry it before him, so the army's numbers are hidden, and the wood itself begins to move. Inside Dunsinane, a cry of women rises. The queen is dead. Macbeth receives it numbly. She should have died hereafter. Then comes his bleakest speech that life is a walking shadow, a poor player strutting his hour upon the stage, a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. A terrified messenger reports that Birnam Wood is moving toward the castle. Macbeth's certainty cracks, and he begins to doubt the equivocation of the fiend that lies like truth. If there is no fleeing and no staying, at least, he says, they will die with harness on their backs. The battle is short. Malcolm's men throw down their leafy screens, and the castle yields almost at once, for Macbeth's people barely fight for him. Macbeth fights like a bear tied to a stake, trusting the prophecy. A young English soldier challenges him and is killed, and Macbeth takes grim comfort. The boy was born of woman. Then Macduff finds him. Turn, hellhound, turn. Macbeth warns him off. His soul is too charged with Macduff's blood already, and he bears a charmed life that cannot yield to any man born of woman. Macduff's answer undoes him. Despair thy charm, for Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. Macbeth curses the juggling fiends that kept the word of promise to his ear, and broke it to his hope, and for a moment refuses to fight, until Macduff offers him life as a caged spectacle, a painted monster on a pole. Pride wins. He will not yield or kiss the ground before young Malcolm. They fight, and Macbeth falls. Macduff returns, carrying the usurper's head, and hails Malcolm King of Scotland, and the army takes up the cry. The old English general learns his son died bravely, wounds in front, and accepts it with stern pride. Malcolm closes the story. His thanes will be made earls, the exiles called home, the dead butcher and his fiend-like queen, who it is thought died by her own hand, answered for, and everyone is invited to see him crowned at Scone. Order has returned, but the land has paid for it in blood. I believe this play is, above everything else, a warning about what ambition does to a person when it slips free of conscience. What strikes me most is that Macbeth is not introduced as a villain. He is the hero of the opening battle, brave, loyal, and completely trusted by his king. I think the author may be making an unsettling point. The capacity for terrible evil can live inside an admirable person, waiting only for the right temptation. The witches never command Macbeth to do anything. They simply name a possibility, and that is enough. To me, that suggests the story is less about fate than about what people do with temptation, and how quickly a fantasy, once entertained, becomes a plan. I also think the book is deeply concerned with guilt and the impossibility of escaping it. Before the murder, Macbeth imagines that if the deed could be done and finished at once, it might be worth the risk. But the story proves the opposite. He murders sleep, and neither he nor his wife ever truly rest again. His hands will not wash clean, and long afterwards his wife is still rubbing hers in her sleep, chasing a spot only she can see. I believe the author may be showing that conscience keeps its own accounts and cannot be managed. Lady Macbeth's collapse is, for me, the clearest proof. She begins as the stronger one, mocking hesitation, and ends destroyed by the very memories she told her husband not to think about. Another thread I notice is the danger of trusting appearances and half-truths. Fair is foul, and foul is fair, the witches say at the start, and everything that follows plays it out. A pleasant castle hides a murder plot. Smiling faces hide daggers, and the prophecies keep the word of promise to the ear, only to break it to the hope. I think the author may be warning how easily people hear what they want to hear, especially when power and fear are involved. Even the gatekeeper jokes about equivocation, which tells me the author wanted the idea noticed. I also believe the story has much to say about violence itself. Early on, Macbeth observes that bloody instructions return to plague the inventor, and that is precisely what happens to him. One murder demands another, and then another, until he is stepped so far in blood that turning back feels harder than going on. By the end, he is hiring killers to slaughter women and children, more from habit than strategy. The story suggests to me that violence does not cure fear, it manufactures more of it, hardening the heart until feeling itself dies, which is why Macbeth can hear of his wife's death and answer only that life is a tale signifying nothing. Finally, I think the book ties private sin to public ruin. Under a usurper, nature itself revolts. Darkness at midday, a falcon killed by an owl, horses eating their own kind, and a country that weeps and bleeds and feels more like a grave than a mother. The author may be suggesting that illegitimate power poisons everything it touches. Against that stands the ending, where rightful rule returns through Malcolm, whose great quality is that he refuses to become what Macbeth became. To me, the lasting message is simple and sobering. A crown gained by crime brings no peace, no sleep, and no joy, and the only victory such ambition ever wins is the destruction of the person who pursued it. Thank you for staying till the end of Macbeth. You obviously are a glutton for punishment. Please hit the like icon if you thought this video deserves it, so other people get to see it. Let me know in the comments which book you would like me to read to you next. Now YouTube have put on screen a channel subscribe icon, and below it my latest video for you to check out. See you next time!